Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time here. Today I am sharing 3 easy and delicious dinner recipes with you guys. The first recipe is for an orange glazed pork tenderloin, and you're just going to start out by marinating your pork tenderloin. So I went ahead and trimmed off the silver skin and put it into a container. Now ideally you would put this into like a gallon Ziploc bag, but I didn't have any on hand, so I just put it into one of my storage containers, and it worked out just fine. I just had to make sure I turned the meat. But you're just going to add in some orange juice, apple cider vinegar, and some ginger and a little bit of salt and pepper, and let that marinate for at least 4 hours. I did it overnight. I actually put it in the marinade the night before I was going to cook it for dinner, so it was in for quite a while, but at least 4 hours is good enough. So this recipe comes from a cookbook that I was gifted a long time ago called the Fabulous 50s Recipe Collection. So I will type it out in the description box below for you. I did tweak things a little bit. For instance, in the marinade it calls for grated orange peel, but since I didn't have any fresh oranges, I left that out. But I, again, will have that typed for you down below. The original recipe calls to grill the pork tenderloin, but since the night I was making this, it was literally 9 degrees outside, that was not going to happen. So I just seared it in a pan. I heated up some olive oil on high heat and then gave it a good sear. Now I should have dried the pork tenderloin off before putting it in because you're seeing a lot of moisture come out, but I was able to get it to brown up after a few minutes. So I just let it brown on all sides, and then I'm going to remove it from the pan and we're going to finish cooking it in the oven. But before it goes into the oven, we're going to need to make the glaze. To make the glaze, you're going to start out by melting some orange marmalade in a pan. Once that melts down, you're going to add in soy sauce, apple cider vinegar, some more ginger, and some Dijon mustard, and then a little bit of salt and pepper to taste. And then I'm going to go ahead and brush some of this on the pork tenderloin before placing it in the oven. Now you want to make sure that you line your pan with aluminum foil because there's a lot of sugar in the orange marmalade and that burns really easily once it hits the pan. So save yourself a big mess of cleanup and make sure that you line it with aluminum foil. So I'm just going to spoon a little bit of that over the top and pop it in the oven, and I cooked it at 400 degrees until it reached 145 in the middle, like the thickest part, and then it was ready to serve. I did almost forget to mention that you did see before I put the glaze on, I did salt and pepper the pork before putting the glaze over the top. This is completely optional, but I just wanted to do it. And then once it comes out of the oven, and it's at 145, you want to let this rest for a few minutes before you slice it, and then we just served it with some rice and then some of that additional leftover glaze. Alright, so the second dinner that I'm sharing in this video is for these Mongolian beef and noodles, and this recipe is super quick and easy to make, but it is so delicious, and it's honestly the perfect weeknight meal. So you're just going to start by browning 1 pound of ground beef. If you would like, you could sub out like ground turkey or ground chicken. That's completely up to you. But you just want to let that brown, and then once it is done cooking, I went ahead and drained the excess grease out of the pan and then returned the beef to it. And then we're going to add in our additional ingredients. So once the beef has been cooked and drained, I'm just going to add in some minced garlic. I'm going to let this cook for a minute, and then once it's cooked down for a little bit, I'm going to add in some ginger. I'm using the ginger paste here, but you can use fresh ginger if you like. I know I was talking with some of you guys in the comment section in my last video about a good way of keeping fresh ginger on hand in the freezer, so I can't wait to try it. I just finished up my paste, so I'm going to get some fresh ginger and give that a try. But then after you add the ginger, we're going to add in some soy sauce, some beef broth, brown sugar, and hoisin, and then we're going to let this cook down. I did also add in some red pepper flakes and some black pepper, and you want to do the red pepper flakes to taste. So if you're not a big fan of spice, I'm not. I just did a little bit. I actually did a little too much. It was a little bit spicy for me. Not too bad, but just want to, measure that with your heart there. And then once that's finished, we're going to add in some chopped green onions. You just want to cook this on medium-high heat until that sauce reduces down. And while this is cooking, you're going to boil some linguine noodles. And then that way when your beef is ready, you're just going to combine the two together, and then you are ready to serve. All right, the final dish that I'm sharing today is for this French onion pasta. I saw this recipe on TikTok, and as soon as I saw the video, I knew I had to make it because I love caramelized onions and French onion soup, so I knew that it would be a great dinner. You're just going to start out by melting some butter in a large pot or Dutch oven, and then you're going to add some thinly sliced onions. Now, the recipe called to cover it for 5 minutes while it's cooking on like medium low, and then remove the cover and cook the onions down the rest of the way without it. I've never tried that technique before, but you can see that by covering it for that 5 minutes, they really softened up pretty quickly. So once I removed the lid, gave it a stir, I'm just going to add in some salt. That's also going to help to draw the moisture out of the onions while they're cooking. And then you're just going to let this cook on low heat for about 20 to 30 minutes. Now, I know the caramelizing of the onions is time consuming, but it's super easy. As long as you have your pan on low heat, you can walk away from it. I do come back every few minutes, 10-15 minutes to give it a stir. And I am showing you guys clips along the way so you can see exactly how brown you want to let the onions get, but you really, really want to cook them down to this deep caramel color. Now, once the onions are caramelized, you're going to add in some garlic if you like. The original recipe does not call for it, but I just love garlic, and I love it with onions, so I knew it would be a good addition. I let that cook down for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to add in some dried thyme. The original recipe, which will be linked in the description box below, called for fresh thyme, but my store didn't have any, so I just swapped it out for some dried thyme. And then you're going to add in some Worcestershire sauce and some beef broth. And then your noodles. I think she used rigatoni in hers, but I used penne pasta. My grocery store actually didn't have any rigatoni, and I know that it's common all across the country that we're seeing a lot of shortages. So you just make those little swaps, and it's not going to break the dish if you use a different type of pasta. I did forget to mention that I did double this recipe, so just keep that in mind depending on how many servings you need when you're recreating it. But you're just going to let this boil. I followed the timing on the package for the pasta, so it was about 12 minutes that it took, and then it was done, and we just add a couple ingredients at the end. I did also want to mention that the original recipe deglazes the pan with some sherry and white wine, but I just skipped those because I didn't have them on hand, and I wasn't going to buy them just for this, and I find that using stock to deglaze is just a really simple swap. So once everything has cooked, you're just going to add in some half and half and some Parmesan cheese. You could also use heavy cream here, she mentioned in the recipe, which I think would be really good. And then I just kind of let that come together for a couple of minutes, and then we were ready to serve. I cannot even begin to describe how amazing the flavor of this pasta was, especially cooking in that stock. I really hope that you guys enjoyed these recipes. Please don't forget to subscribe before you go, and let me know what you're interested in seeing in the comments down below.